Hello. So, we are here for a take 2 on the discussion about Dreaming Spanish's roadmap. So, I have had some really great conversations in the comments section about that video, and so I really appreciate everyone who took the time to, write out a thoughtful comment. That is always greatly appreciated. So that video was just made pretty much as a way to talk about my level at approximately 1,000 hours. I initially planned to just make a video saying that I recently hit, pretty sure, 1,000 hours of input, what I felt like my level was. But then I saw this roadmap actually posted somewhere on Reddit, completely unrelated, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I linked it on my Instagram story and had some really great conversations with people in my DMs. And so I thought, hey, this would make an interesting video. You never know what videos are going to make it out of your regular audience and which ones are not. So I didn't necessarily make enough of a preamble, enough of an explanation on that video. And so I do understand where some of the misunderstandings came from. I never had anything against Dreaming Spanish, and I think that they are a great service. I had somehow honestly never heard of them when I was a beginner, and then I kind of thought that they were something for beginners then when I, did finally hear about them. So it wasn't something that even occurred to me to start using until very recently. But I have since started listening to some of the advanced videos, and I'm really enjoying them. It was never done with ill will or a spirit of criticism. It was a spirit of conversation. Just for posterity's sake, I will talk about my history with Spanish and my current level. So I did not take Spanish in high school or anything. I had no Spanish background other than what comes from, living in the United States and maybe the occasional Duolingo fling over the years. I decided in about 2020, end of 2019, that I wanted to learn Spanish for real. And so I did one course at a community college online. I didn't really know anything about learning languages or the language learning community, so I kind of just needed a place to start. So, 2020, January through April probably, I was doing an online course. It was okay. It wasn't a bad experience, but I knew pretty much right away that it was not the way that I wanted to continue learning. So I was doing a lot of Googling, came to find the language learning community on YouTube, a little bit on Reddit, and started doing a lot of research. From then on, I did have kind of a little bit of an up and down for a while. There are videos from that time period. I was fairly inconsistent throughout 2021. I felt like I was doing a fair amount in Spanish, but in retrospect, knowing how much it actually takes to learn, I was not doing very much. Some people seemed really confident in assuming that I was using advanced native content from day one, and that is a tiny bit true. I would watch Spanish TV, mostly just for motivation and that sort of thing. And I did use children's books, which, is controversial, but I would do the SpanishExperiment.com stories. I watched the Spanish After Hours YouTube channel. I did do about half of the Ole Richards beginner book. There was quite a bit of graded content in there. The Newsella app for news sites. I used the Bilingua app. So, I did use stair steps, but to be fair, I did move into native content much earlier than they say that you should on Dreaming Spanish. I was probably, I'm going to guess, at around 300 hours maybe when I started doing majority native content. So now moving on to some misconceptions that I think people had about what I was saying in this video or about my journey. There were some people who really seemed to feel that I was like a bitter failed language learner, I was saying, oh, I didn't get these kind of results and blah, blah, blah. And it must be because I was trying to use native content. And that's definitely not true. I did say that my output is not what they say it will be in the roadmap. And it is not. I am not conversationally fluent, but I do understand more than they say that you will. And some people also seem to be insinuating that I don't actually understand the things that I say that I understand, or I am, grinding through it or slogging through it. That is the only part of this whole interaction that I found sort of offensive, was that people were kind of implying that I'm not actually able to do the things that I say I'm able to do, or, that I'm just out here pointlessly like throwing myself against the wall, not succeeding. And that is not true. Yes, I do sometimes purposely choose books that are above my level, and that's definitely not the most efficient thing to do, and we'll talk about that more later. But I'm always doing that with the understanding that this is a challenge, that I'm not going to understand all of it, but it's, a challenge that I want to take on. But again, those are few and far between. 70% of my input is listening only. I'm normally listening to audiobooks, and I try to choose audiobooks that are easier for me. Or podcasts or YouTube videos, dreaming Spanish videos, they are not always, 90 or 98% comprehensible, like some of the, die-hard people would say. Certainly there is imagery that is sometimes lost on me, but by and large, I am understanding the majority of things. And again, this may not be the most efficient thing, but it also is not without use. If you think about how children are learning, they are not learning based on things that they understand 90 or 98% of. They are getting bombarded with native content at all times. So even if it is slightly less efficient, it is still doing things. But anyway, I've gotten off track here. TV shows, I would say I understand truly the vast majority. I could probably go over an episode of most TV shows without encountering something that I don't understand. So, my understanding is not the same as it is in English by any stretch, but I'm also not struggling. I enjoy these things. It does not feel like a large amount of effort. It feels close to, but not the same as listening to things in English. So a secondary aspect of this is that people who use graded content often make a very, very big deal about how difficult native content is. And yes, it absolutely can be really difficult, but it's also a matter of what you're used to. So any learning methodology has its trade-offs, you are gaining something and you are giving something up, no matter what it is. So if you're doing comprehensible input versus classroom learning or speak early or whatever, the major thing that you're giving up is that ability to speak early. If you want to go to Mexico tomorrow and start speaking Spanish, comprehensible input is probably not the method that you're going to choose, because that is an inherent loss of that method. Again, it's for a greater good, hopefully down the road, but there are drawbacks to every single thing here. There are gives and takes, and something that you are giving up in, a very strict comprehensible input methodology is native content. Your ability to understand native content, because it is really difficult, but it's also just a matter of what you're used to. If you have hundreds and hundreds of hours in Dreaming Spanish and you are watching, intermediate or advanced videos, you probably could also understand native content, but you're not used to it. You're not used to the speed. You're not used to the different accents, different inflections, the way that they lop off the beginnings or ends of words or mush words together. You're just not used to it. It's not that you are not advanced enough yet. It's that you haven't been exposed to it. And again, this is hopefully for the greater end good of making progress faster. You are, banking on, and I think probably correctly banking on, that this is more efficient. But it is a drawback. So when people are doubting how effective using native content is because they can't understand it, when they have barely tried, that is not really giving it a fair chance. If you have only really been using strictly comprehensible input and you're saying, well, she can't be getting results because I tried watching, Money Heist and I couldn't understand anything, that's not a fair assessment, because you haven't given it enough time. You haven't given yourself enough time to understand native content, if that makes sense. You don't have to. I'm not saying you should. It's totally up to you on whether you want to do that or not. But you also can't tell me that it's not working for me, because it is. And I would say that the differences are smaller than people think they are in how rapidly you will get results. So, I did openly disagree with a few things about the roadmap, but overall, I would say that I mostly agreed with the roadmap. I didn't do a good job of expressing that, and that's on me. Because it's not that interesting to just scroll through and say like, yep, I agree. But, I mostly agreed with what they were saying. I said that I feel like it slightly underestimates what you can understand, again, related to native content. And I think that it slightly overestimates how much you can produce. But other than that, I really felt like it was pretty much spot on, even with being someone who used a lot of native content from a much earlier, time period than they recommend. I did say that I felt like I was about half a level behind in output, but, that's not that far behind. Everyone who was saying that I completely screwed myself over, oh, this will cost you so much. I see you, Reddit. So I cost myself half a level on output and I'm right on track for input. That doesn't seem like that much of a catastrophe to me. So I would say, and this is something that I had a really, really insightful comment about that I really wanted to talk about, there are things that I do think that do progress slower when you do native content versus, comprehensible input. And one of them is probably output. You have overwhelmed your brain with a lot more grammatical structures, a lot more vocabulary, and it's going to take your subconscious longer to sort through all of that than it would take if you have inserted less in there. If you have built on a really, really organized structure, you've done maybe a little bit of that pre-sorting for your brain. I do not think that this is detrimental on any level, personally. I think that my brain will be completely capable of sorting through all of this. But I do think that this person made an excellent point, and it is something that I have noticed, and it is something that I am now working on because my goals have slightly changed, that I understand all of the verb tenses pretty much perfectly, but I don't know when to use which. My brain has not sorted that information out for me yet. And that is something that conceivably, I haven't done this, so I don't know, but conceivably I could see being faster with comprehensible input, that you, again, introduce those in a very, gradual way, and your brain has an easier time latching onto the correct thing and spitting it out. So, again, I do think that there are drawbacks and advantages to any method, and the drawback that I can see most clearly right now for me for native content is that my production is lagging a little bit compared to what you might achieve with something like this. I don't have any problem admitting that. I admitted it in the original video, but I also don't think it's this catastrophic thing that people made it out to be, that I'm, comparing apples and oranges, that I'm, totally off base in comparing these two things. I think it's a very slight difference. And, if you resent me using the Dreaming Spanish roadmap as an example, then truly, allow me to be your cautionary tale. I'm going to say something that's going to sound really, really snarky here, but I genuinely don't mean it to be. If you see my results and they look bad to you, then don't do what I did. It is honestly that straightforward. If you think that, being able to comfortably watch native television, to be able to fairly comfortably listen to the audiobook of or read, native books, popular fiction, YA, dabbling a little bit in literary fiction sometimes, but not necessarily being at the speaking level or writing level. My writing is a little bit better than my speaking, but that you might get with comprehensible input, then don't do native input. That's it. That's totally fine. But that's not me criticizing comprehensible input to say that I prefer those drawbacks. So, when I started learning Spanish, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do with it. And so my primary goal was to be able to do native content. I wanted to be able to watch things in Spanish. I wanted to be able to read things in Spanish. My primary hobby outside of language learning is reading. I have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to talking about all of the books that I read. It completely made sense for me to focus on native content above all else, even if that slightly delayed certain things. And again, I want to reiterate, I did not do advanced native content from day one. I did build up to it, but I did it much earlier. Since then, my priorities have slightly shifted. I will be going to a Spanish-speaking country soon for a trip. I am considering doing like higher education of some kind in Spanish, and so there are things that I will be choosing to focus on in my studies that will depart from this path, and that is something that I have talked about in a few videos recently outside of this video, but the majority of my input is still going to be native content. I am very, very comfortable with native content, and I am gaining a lot from it. I am making a lot of progress. I just want to slightly fine-tune that progress, maybe accelerate certain things because, again, my goals have changed, but I quite strongly believe that I could continue doing what I had been doing indefinitely and I would achieve everything that I wanted to achieve. So my ultimate point with this video is that, I've never claimed to be an expert. In fact, I very openly state in my channel description, this is not an advice channel. I've never learned a language to fluency other than my native one, but I am, to some extent proof that there is not only one way to do things. Even if Dreaming Spanish's method is the best way to learn a language, bar none, doesn't have a single fault, you still don't have to do it that way unless you want to. If it's not fun for you, then there's no need to burn yourself out over it. I think people got offended that I said that I don't like graded content. And again, this was not really having watched a lot of Dreaming Spanish's videos, so possibly if I had watched them when I was a beginner, I might have changed my mind, but I don't think so, to be honest. It's not anything against graded content, it's something against me. I do not have a good attention span. I never have. It's not that I think that they are poor quality or anything. I am sure that I watch a lot of things that any reasonable person would find very boring. There is truly no logic in what the brain finds entertaining versus what it doesn't. But I fairly strongly ascribe to Stephen Krashen's idea that input has to be compelling for it to be really effective, that you really need to get drawn in to something in order for your brain to really start doing the rapid fire stuff. And so, normally I can't get into that kind of state with graded content. So I consider graded content a necessary stepping stone to native content. But again, that's just a me problem. If you do that and it's fun for you, truly go off. These videos are great, but if you want to incorporate other stuff into your learning, do it. There is no need to have this fear-mongering idea that it is not going to get you results. It is still going to get you results. And if it is worth a tiny efficiency trade-off for you, like it was for me, just do it. Don't let anybody tell you not to do that just because it is not what was written down on a piece of paper as the correct way to do it. If you are an avid video game player, putting all of your video games languages into Spanish may not be the most efficient language learning practice that you could ever do, but it might be the best thing that you could ever do for your language learning because you are the one who's going to actually be doing it. You're the one that's going to be putting in all those hours. And if 3,000 hours of playing video games goes by like that for you, then of course those 3,000 hours are more efficient regardless of how less efficient each individual hour might be. So I am so grateful to the absolute wealth of information that the language learning community has given to me over the past few years, and I will continue to take advantage of all of that knowledge and experience. But don't let people tell you how you have to do things. If you're getting results that you are happy with and you're mostly enjoying the process, that is it. That's the end goal. So again, thank you for watching. Thanks for coming along on this slightly extended journey, and I look forward to reading your comments.